Tonight, on the eve of the July 4th holiday, Donald Trump is celebrating a major legislative win with huge implications in the U.S. for years to come.
There could be no better birthday present for America than the phenomenal victory we achieved.
The marathon session to pass Trump's big bill and the devastating impact it could have on millions of Americans.
It attacks children and seniors and everyday Americans.
Chaos for summer travelers as bomb threats across this country ground flights and cause widespread delays.
There's cops everywhere, and we're like, what's happening? People are piling up.
And a dangerous trend under the sun.
I don't usually put on sunscreen. Just lie right down and tan.
Concerns young people aren't taking skin cancer seriously enough.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. Donald Trump has notched perhaps the deepest, most lasting legislative win of his political career. What is officially titled the One Big Beautiful Bill Act has passed a final vote in the U.S. House of Representatives. It's transformative, including not just trillions in tax cuts, but tens of billions of dollars to build immigrant detention facilities and even that border wall with Mexico promised years ago, all while cutting more than $1 trillion from health care and food stamps for low-income Americans. In short, it aims to make many of Trump's most divisive and ambitious promises into realities. And as Katie Simpson shows us, tonight he went on stage to bask in the cheers of his supporters.
A victory lap for Donald Trump on what will be remembered as one of the most consequential days in all his time as president.
There could be no better birthday present for America than the phenomenal victory we achieved just hours ago when Congress passed the One Big Beautiful Bill to make America great again.
His big, beautiful bill, that sweeping legislative package, squeaking through Congress.
The yeas are 218, the nays are 214. The motion is adopted.
It took a lot of arm twisting, but in the end, only 2 Republicans would defect. Excited Republicans, led by Speaker Mike Johnson, who said his party had to act fast while in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House.
I believed in this vision. I believed in the group. I believe in America. I believe we have the greatest nation.
The bill extends and expands tax cuts for households and corporations, boosts spending for the military and immigration enforcement. It ends some subsidies for green energy in favor of support for the fossil fuel industry. It also adds trillions of dollars to the national debt, changes and makes cuts to social programs for the poor, children, and the elderly, with warnings up to 17 million Americans could lose their health insurance.
Everybody should vote no against it because of how it attacks children and seniors and everyday Americans.
Democrats tried to stop the bill from passing. House Leader Hakeem Jeffries speaking for a record 8 hours and 45 minutes, trying to convince Republicans to join them. His efforts ultimately failed and maybe even backfired. Some Republicans were infuriated by the delay tactic.
What we just heard can be defined in one word: a bunch of hogwash.
Trump will sign the legislation Friday during a 4th of July celebration at the White House. He is being credited with getting this across the finish line as he was deeply involved in the negotiation process.
And Katie, this came down, it seems, to Trump somehow convincing the hesitant Republicans to get on board. How?
Yeah, some lawmakers say Trump cut deals with them, promising to use executive orders to address their concerns. Others say Trump used a mix of flattery and threats to make his point. And then some Republicans say they may not have liked the bill, but they feared the legislation would die if it had to keep going back and forth between the House and the Senate. And that fear was motivating.
Okay. Katie Simpson in Washington, thank you.
Thanks.
We have a new look at the impact of U.S. tariffs on the economy with a snapshot of Canada's trade deficit. After a record-breaking deficit in April, the overall trade deficit shrunk to $5.9 billion in May. Exports to the U.S. decreased for a fourth consecutive month by 0.9%. That is the lowest since the pandemic. Canada's total exports rose 1.1%, the first increase in 4 months. Some experts credit that to Canada's aim to diversify its markets. Well, some travelers are trying to get their itineraries back on track tonight after a series of bomb threats halted flights at many Canadian airports. As Nicole Williams explains, as the chaos subsides, the questions remain.
This was the scene at Ottawa's International Airport Thursday morning. The terminal crawling with police officers, sniffer dogs, and hundreds of passengers left waiting.
There's cops everywhere, and we're like, what's happening? People are piling up. They just kept saying security threat.
More specifically, a bomb threat. NAV Canada, which oversees air traffic control, says early morning threats affected flights out of Ottawa, Montreal, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary, and Vancouver. Staff were moved to safety while the agency and police swept the area. Passengers caught up in it all.
Do I have the opportunity even to leave right now because I don't feel safe here? And that was also going through my mind of I've got my 3 kids at home and now I'm sitting in an airport that has a bomb threat.
Ottawa airport officials say they announced updates to people in terminal, but this woman says there needed to be more efforts to notify people.
We get down through security, everything's fine until we look to find our gate and we see that the hallway to our gate's blocked off.
NAV Canada says operations are back to normal, but dozens of flights, including to Toronto and Halifax, Chicago, Fort Lauderdale, Washington, even Paris, were delayed or canceled, leaving passengers in the lurch.
I'm probably around $500 to $600 just by not making my flight today.
Some people stuck at the Ottawa airport for hours longer than expected. Others unable to rebook their flights until days from now. And many not able to get any help at all with costs of meals and hotels.
The airline couldn't have done anything. So in these situations, they are not obligated to compensate the passengers financially.
And NAV Canada asking passengers to continue checking their flight status before they head to the airport in case of any further disruptions.
And Nicole, it's pretty interesting how quiet authorities are keeping about this investigation.
That's right. They're not saying much about this bomb threat because of security reasons, but Winnipeg RCMP did say that the airport there received a call at 6 a.m. saying there was a bomb in the air control tower. When they did a sweep, they found nothing, but the investigation into exactly what happened continues. NAV Canada working with both police and Transport Canada to find out what happened.
All right, Nicole Williams at the Ottawa airport. Hundreds of firefighters are battling a massive wildfire on the Greek island of Crete tonight. So over 1,000 people have been forced to flee their homes because of the flames. The fire broke out on Wednesday and has spread rapidly due to strong winds. Local media is reporting that some people have been hospitalized with respiratory issues. Well, as summer gets underway, more people are out, obviously, enjoying the sunshine. But new data suggests many Canadians aren't protecting themselves from the sun, especially young people. As Alison Northcott explains, this comes as cases of skin cancer rise.
As these Toronto beachgoers enjoy the hot summer sun, some lather on sunscreen, while others prefer to go without.
No, I don't usually put on sunscreen. Just lie right down and tan.
A recent study looking at what Canadian adults do to prevent UV exposure found more than 60% of respondents never or only occasionally use sunscreen on the body. Young adults 18 to 29 had higher odds than those 70 and up of spending more time in the sun, using tanning beds, and getting sunburns.
Our messaging in terms of engaging in appropriate sun protection are just not penetrating into the minds of Canadians.
The study's author says some changes could help, like making sunscreen tax-free or free so more people can afford it. And increasing awareness about the links between UV exposure and skin cancer is also key.
Melanomas, you don't get them in your 60s. You get them by burning your skin as adolescents and young adults.
Let me take a look at this guy.
Cases of melanoma, the most serious form of skin cancer with the highest risk of death, increased by an estimated 17% between 2023 and 2024, according to Melanoma Canada.
Men in particular are using less sunscreen There may be an influence of social media and sort of a backlash against sunscreen use. Tanning is still popular.
Get your skin checked. Kelly Johnston was first diagnosed with skin cancer at 24, then 3 years ago with melanoma.
It definitely wakes you up when you get a scare like this. So your protection and what you do with the sun or how to avoid the sun is just so much more important.
But for some, the risk can seem far off.
Sometimes I prefer to just get that tan in the moment. I'll worry about that later.
Dermatologists say you can protect yourself with sunscreen and protective clothing to lower your risk of sunburns and future skin cancers. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
The mother of a Quebec toddler who went missing for 4 days last month is facing a new charge tonight: criminal negligence causing bodily harm. That's in addition to a count of child abandonment that she was already facing.
Crown decided to add this other accusation because we receive other evidence that I cannot tell you today, but we have enough to put this charge. The maximum sentence to that accusation is 10 years regarding the criminal code.
Neither the mother nor the child can be named due to a publication ban, but we can tell you that last month, the mother reported her daughter missing. After a massive search, the toddler was found alive near an Ontario highway. The mother appeared in court today for a bail hearing, which is expected to continue tomorrow. Well, police near Toronto are investigating an attack on a Muslim woman, which some in the community say was motivated by hate. The victim was assaulted by a group who allegedly ripped off her hijab. Dale Manukduk has more on the violent incident and the fears it's raising.
Durham police are investigating what they call a swarming in Oshawa, the alleged attack inside this pizza just after midnight on Wednesday.
A Muslim woman working in a local business here in Oshawa saw a number of individuals trying to commit theft inside the restaurant. She then confronted the group of a dozen or so people, including teenagers.
A short, edited clip of surveillance video posted by the National Council of Canadian Muslims shows a group go behind the service counter and attack a woman.
Nothing like this has happened to us before.
The victim's daughter, who is not being identified for personal safety concerns, says more than 10 people viciously attacked her mother.
Ripping her hijab off, tearing out clumps of her hair, stomping on her neck, her back.
She says her mother is lucky to be alive and is deeply shaken. Police are not calling it a hate-motivated crime. The video does not show what happened before the attack. But advocates and politicians say it's another example of rising Islamophobia, referring to an attack in nearby Ajax in March when an individual allegedly tried to set a woman wearing a hijab on fire at a library. Data from Statistics Canada shows reported hate crimes targeting religion had a sharp increase from 2022 to 2023, but dipped slightly last year. There is no hate crime offense in Canada's criminal code, but hate motivation can be considered during sentencing.
It's too early to tell. There's clearly a case of assault anyway, or a case to be made of assault. And whether it's hateful or not will depend on the result of the police investigation.
As part of its investigation, Durham police says that all motives, including the potential that this was a hate-motivated offense, are being examined. It says that its hate crimes and equity and inclusion unit are working with investigators. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Oshawa.
There are reports tonight that both Hamas and Israel are ready to move forward with ceasefire talks. Despite that, the bloodshed in Gaza continues. Palestinians mourned the dead and comforted the living. Local health officials say at least 59 people were killed, including some who were trying to get food aid. Israel dismissed all reports of deaths at aid sites as terrorist propaganda. The U.S. organization that distributes aid also denied an Associated Press report citing whistleblowers who say contractors at those sites are using live fire on crowds. You're seeing Russian drones careening into the central Ukrainian city of Poltava amid reports that Washington has halted shipments of air defense munitions.
Missiles for Patriot systems. This is crucial.
It was a top concern for the Ukrainian president as he met with European officials.
Tomorrow or in close days, these days, I will speak about it with President Trump.
Russia's president spoke with Donald Trump today in an hour-long call.
I didn't make any progress with him today at all.
According to the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin told Trump Russia will not step back from its goals in Ukraine. The soccer world is in shock tonight after a star player's sudden death. Diogo Jota and his brother died after their car veered off a road and burst into flames. Jota had helped Liverpool win the Premier League title. And as Jamie Strachan shows us, his tragic death is being felt by fans in this country too.
In front of Anfield Stadium, home to the Liverpool Football Club since 1892, a growing tribute.
Unless you're part of the footballing family, people probably won't get it, but it's like you knew.
28-year-old Liverpool star Diogo Jota was a fan favorite. The Portuguese star, along with his brother, were killed after a single car crash in Spain involving their Lamborghini.
I absolutely couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it at all.
Spanish authorities are investigating what caused the crash, including the possibility one of the vehicle's tires exploded.
Here's Diogo Jota.
Jota played 182 games for Liverpool and was also a key member of the Portuguese national team. His Portuguese teammate Cristiano Ronaldo wrote, "It doesn't make sense. We were just together with the national team. You had just gotten married." Jota was married just 11 days ago and leaves behind 3 young children. In Liverpool, the Reds are an integral part of the city's identity.
He had a very special song about him, and that was even sung when he wasn't on the pitch. So it shows you that emotional connection between Diogo Jota and Liverpool fans.
His death being felt around the soccer world.
They'll have so much family out there.
Including in Toronto, home to one of the largest Liverpool supporters clubs outside of England.
I mean, if you've seen Ted Lasso, like when one of the characters says football is life, it really is.
Liverpool's slogan and anthem is, "You'll never walk alone."
We've had these super glorious eras, these barren runs with tragedy involved. So "You'll never walk alone" is that constant in the middle that kind of keeps us going on the down days like today.
A difficult day for Liverpool supporters.
And it might come to Diogo Jota.
And fans everywhere of the beautiful game. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
4 people are dead, 14 others injured after a drive-by shooting in Chicago.
Absolute chaos. It's from people screaming to blood on the streets to people laying on the streets.
It happened outside a restaurant and lounge on Wednesday night. Police say 3 people inside an SUV fired shots into a crowd on the sidewalk. There are reports the crowd was leaving the lounge after an album release party. Police say no one is in custody. And actor Michael Madsen is being remembered tonight for being so good at playing someone so bad.
You ever listen to K. Billy's Super Sounds of the 70s? It's my personal favorite.
This was Madsen's breakout role in Reservoir Dogs, one of 4 Quentin Tarantino movies where he earned his tough guy reputation. But Madsen could also warm hearts like he did in the feel-good story of Free Willy. Madsen died this morning at the age of 67. His manager confirmed he had a heart attack. Well, an ancient archaeological site in Saskatchewan has become the target of looters.
You're stealing from the future, is what you're doing by pilfering this site.
How some are fighting to preserve these crucial relics. New details about what caused a catastrophic landslide at a Yukon gold mine.
Public confidence is lost quickly and built slowly.
The damage still being felt in nearby communities. And a Nova Scotia man gets a big shout out from one of Canada's biggest bands.
He was nice enough to give me a guitar to play tonight, so.
We're back in 2. There you go. It is Stampede season in Calgary. The city's mayor and Alberta's premier taking their turns at the griddle for the unofficial kickoff, the first flip pancake breakfast. Officially, the Calgary Stampede begins tomorrow and runs for 10 days. Well, at an archaeological dig in Saskatchewan, illegal scavengers are making off with ancient artifacts thousands of years old and disturbing a site that holds some priceless history. This is happening near the city of Prince Albert, and as Alexander Silberman shows us, it's stirring action among Indigenous communities.
Here on the North Saskatchewan River, a rare glimpse into how Indigenous people lived nearly 11,000 years ago. But as archaeologists work with great care to unearth tools and soil samples, looters are threatening these valuable clues to the past.
To me, it is so selfish.
This local historian says he's noticing shovel markings and damage as amateur treasure seekers, derisively known as pot hunters, have started turning up.
You're stealing from the future, is what you're doing by pilfering this site.
The Cree name for the site, Asawananik, means a place to cross. A wealth of evidence shows it was an important spot for bison migration and home to long-term indigenous settlement. Testing of a piece of charcoal confirmed people arrived here shortly after glaciers receded.
This is a window for us, an opportunity and a window for us to peer back thousands of years and write the story right from the onset of habitation.
Indigenous leaders and researchers are now fighting to preserve that story. They've taken funding away from scientific study to add cameras and a motion detector. If the looters go unchecked, archaeologists warn historical context could be lost.
Because you want to know what is the relationship amongst the different artifacts that we find at a site. If something's pot hunted, then you just have a pile of stuff, sitting on the floor.
It's a part of our identity, and I mean, without the land, we don't have that identity.
Nearby First Nations and Métis communities are now in talks with the provincial government. They hope securing a heritage site designation could help stop the damage and preserve the history still hidden under the soil. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Regina.
Contaminated groundwater caused by a gold mine disaster is prompting renewed calls for a public inquiry.
It's not safe anymore, and the mess is in the water. The mess is on the land.
The push to ban part of the mining process in order to avoid another catastrophe. And the massive cost of Trump's big bill.
We're on this exploding path of debt.
Andrew Chang on the potential hit to America's economy. The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next. There it goes. Canada's singles hopes at Wimbledon have ended. Both Victoria Mboko and Felix Auger-Aliassime were eliminated in second-round matches. The 18-year-old Mboko of Burlington fell to American Haley Baptiste. Montreal's Auger-Aliassime was upset by German Jan-Lennard Struff in 4 sets. Ottawa's Gabriel Dabrowski is still alive in women's doubles, and Novak Djokovic added another record to his name. He reached Wimbledon's third round for a 19th time. Well, people in the Yukon are pushing for more answers tonight into what caused a major landslide at a gold mine last year. The results of an investigation into the cause are now out, but as Gabrielle Plonka explains, many say this did not go far enough.
A year after a catastrophic landslide at a Yukon gold mine released a cyanide solution into the environment, an independent review is providing some answers as to the cause. It found the Eagle Mine's heap leaching facility, which uses cyanide to extract gold, wasn't draining properly, and that the company used poor quality ore and had malfunctioning machinery. The Yukon's Minister of Mines says his government is taking the findings seriously.
Public confidence is lost quickly and built slowly. So I think that we have to continue that hard work.
The report lists 55 recommendations, some of them geared towards government, others towards the mining industry.
That it isn't just the Yukon that's looking at this, right? The whole mining industry is looking at it, trying to understand, everyone wants to make sure mining is done safely.
The Eagle Mine is currently in receivership and up for sale. It sits on the traditional territory of the First Nation of Nacho-Nyak-Dun. Community members there continue to grapple with the disaster.
It's not safe anymore, and the mess is in the water. The mess is on the land. And it's just not fair to all those that live around it. We're the ones that we have to live with that now.
A local advocacy group is pushing to ban the open pad heap leach mining process in the Yukon entirely. The group's chair says the latest review lacks real answers.
Who's accountable? Isn't our politicians? Shouldn't they be accountable? And for allowing these things to take place?
It's been a long year for residents since the Eagle mine failed. They say this report is technical, but it still doesn't answer the question on everybody's mind. Whose fault is it? Roberts and the First Nation of Nacho Dunn still want a public inquiry. That remains to be seen. Gabrielle Planca, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Now, let's break down the news shaping our world. The mammoth U.S. debt strikes fear in economists.
On a trajectory that's unsustainable.
I want to really make a lot of money, pay off debt.
But Donald Trump's big bill means even deeper deficits. At what point do things get dangerous?
Literally, things could unravel tomorrow.
Andrew Chang, host of CBC's About That, went looking for that breaking point. Here's how we'll know when Washington has maxed out its credit limit and what it will mean for the rest of us.
It's hard to turn on a U.S. news channel these days without hearing someone refer to
the national debt.
The national debt.
The national debt.
It's big, massive, actually, but it's not new, right? The U.S. has been deep in debt for a while now. So why all of a sudden does it feel like everyone's getting a little panicky? Journalists, investors, politicians, economists. Well, for starters, there's this.
We call it the one big beautiful bill.
The U.S. House of Representatives approved the sweeping legislation by just 4 votes.
The yeas are 218, the nays are 214. The motion is adopted.
Supporters say that bill, it reimagines border security, immigration, introduces sweeping tax cuts. But one big downside is that these things are expensive. Overall, the Congressional Budget Office projects it could add an extra $2.8 trillion to the federal debt over the next decade.
It's an astronomically large sum.
Okay, now, to be fair, there is a long presidential tradition of adding to the country's debt, and you certainly can't blame the size of the debt on Trump alone. But he did spend an awful lot of time swearing up and down that he wouldn't make the problem worse.
We'll hand him a little Bitcoin and wipe out our $35 trillion. Use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt. I want to really make a lot of money, pay off debt.
And if the government's own number crunchers say Trump's plan will add trillions to the debt load,
What a lot of people don't realize is that even under current law, we're on this exploding path of debt relative to the size of the economy.
There's no question the United States is on a trajectory that's unsustainable.
So here's the trillion-dollar question. When does all of this go from just some mathy, abstract worry years off in the future to becoming everyone's problem? Here's a look at the running national debt clock in the US. As of this recording, it's just over $36 trillion. Some of that is debt that gets swapped between governmental agencies, but the vast majority of that is real public-facing debt. Easily paid off if every single American would just pony up $100 grand. But for context, the debt is about double what it was just 10 years ago. You can blame both Republicans and Democrats for that. And yes, some more than others, even setting the pandemic aside, but consistently, all American presidents in the last 20 or so years have spent deep into the red. Add that all together, that's how you get to 30 or so trillion. But this alone isn't proof that there's a problem because, and this will sound crazy, we haven't yet established whether $30 trillion is a particularly big number. But we can figure that out by examining the US debt to GDP ratio. Yay. Because to put it really simply, if I owe my friend $100, what makes that debt fine or catastrophic really depends on how much money I make in a year, right? Like if I'm between jobs, that $100 is an expense I might not be able to afford, but if I'm a billionaire, then who cares? And the US is actually a trillionaire. The US economy, by virtue of its size, can tolerate a surprising amount of debt, but not unlimited. Right now, the debt it has to eventually pay back to the public is just over what the US makes in a year. Just over 100% of its GDP, meaning its debt pile is the same size as the country's entire annual output. That is Second World War level debt, except in 2025, there's no world war, and the US isn't spending a whole bunch of money to rebuild Europe.
The difference between the 21st century in the US and the 20th century is when we had an emergency in the 20th century, we cleaned up afterwards. We brought the debt back down. So we had World War II, it came back down. In the 21st century, Great Recession, it goes from 30 to 70. Pandemic goes from 70 to 100, and no one fixes anything.
So when does this big issue start actually becoming a big problem? Like, if the US is at 100% debt to GDP ratio, is there a higher number, a tipping point, where you can't just keep borrowing and carrying on? Well, like all things finance, there's no light switch moment where suddenly US finances collapse into a black hole, but 175%. 175. That is, according to the economists we spoke to, when things might start to unravel in a serious way. The thinking being, at that level, the interest payments on your debt are likely so high relative to what you have to spend each year as a government that you simply can't raise taxes fast enough or cut spending deep enough to stay afloat. That's what happened to Greece. In the early 2010s, Greek debt ballooned past 175% of GDP. And in order to avoid default, the government was forced to cut essential services and raise taxes. The economy collapsed into a deep recession, and regular people paid the price with pension cuts, mass unemployment, all blanketed in anger.
Greeks were defiant and angry over such demands. Now, some of them are sounding just plain scared. I'm afraid that worse days will come, says this man, much more difficult days.
And it took years, not a year, not 2 years, years and years for them to get back to the point where the economy was growing again.
Now, to be clear, the US is nowhere near that point right now, but the trajectory is accelerating. According to one estimate by the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, that's a nonpartisan policy group, if Trump were to deliver on all of the measures he promised during his presidential campaign, the debt to GDP ratio could rise to 143% in just 10 years, and that's their conservative estimate. Worst case, they figure, it could rise as high as 161%. And their estimates are not unique. The Congressional Budget Office, so that's the US government itself, they modeled even further ahead, projecting if all Trump's tax cuts were to be made permanent, US debt could reach 200% of GDP by 2047 and 250% by 2054.
So literally double it over the course of the next 30 years just from this legislation alone. So this is a very significant increase in our aggregate debt burden.
And here's the thing, the balance sheet doesn't even need to get that bad for real problems to show up. All it really takes is for investors to lose faith that the government has things under control.
Once capital markets stop believing that Congress will ever get its act together, I mean, literally things could unravel tomorrow.
More on America's soaring debt straight ahead, including how it could rock financial markets.
We are perilously close to the moment when you might want to worry a lot.
The price that could be paid by everyday Americans. Why the growing U.S. debt could explode as a problem for everyone.
What happens in Washington doesn't stay in Washington.
Interest charges turn into time bombs.
Once you have a debt crisis, you can't issue new debt to get out of that.
Here's Andrew Chang with the conclusion of his pretty sobering analysis.
Buying U.S. government debt is seen as one of the safest investments in the world because the U.S. has always paid its debts on time, in full. In fact, when the U.S. pays its debt by issuing bonds and then by paying investors an interest rate for buying those bonds, you'll hear investors referring to that bond rate as the risk-free rate, meaning it's not the biggest return on investment in the world, but it's just about guaranteed. So what happens if investors start to worry that maybe the US government doesn't have its fiscal house in order? What if investing in US debt isn't completely risk-free?
The crucial day is the day they lose confidence in the ability of the United States to repay in a timely fashion. And if they lose faith in that, they start jacking up the interest rates that they charge the U.S. as compensation for the risk we don't pay back, or they cut you off entirely.
And that's important because that's where a bad situation can turn worse. The riskier the investment, the more expensive it can become to pay back. And all kinds of factors, from tariffs to inflation to how highly changeable U.S. policy on anything can be from day to day, they all get baked in.
Bonds, they've had huge move the last few days.
Debt deficits and tariffs, curve steepening. We're over 50 basis points in 2s to 10s.
There are a lot of indicators out there that makes the bond market a little nervous.
The risks aren't that treasuries aren't going to be paid out. The risks are more that as you look at interest rates, they're going to have to be higher because people are going to demand higher interest rates to be willing to hold so much U.S. debt.
And those higher interest rates can snowball real fast. According to JP Morgan, if bond rates rise by just 1%, the U.S. would have to pay $300 billion more in interest to its debt holders every year. That's on top of the $1.1 trillion it's already paying in interest every year. And then, once you throw in the extra $100 billion in interest that Trump's bill is projected to add annually, you can start to see why some people are getting nervous.
The thing that we always worry about with irresponsible youth is you give them a credit card, they run up a bill, and now they have to get a new credit card to pay off the old credit card. Well, the U.S. borrowed $1.8 trillion last year, and over $1 trillion of it was to pay interest on previous borrowing. So we are perilously close to the moment when you might want to worry a lot.
These things can spiral out of control, and that's kind of the big risk.
And that risk now has credit agencies on alert too. Just a few weeks ago, Moody's stripped from the U.S. the very last of its highest tier credit ratings. Their decision, they wrote, was because of the increase over more than a decade in government debt and interest payment ratios to levels that are significantly higher than similarly rated sovereigns.
They said, you have too much debt and you have to pay too much interest. You have a problem. That to me is more alarming.
But all of this is still pretty abstract, right? Maybe you're wondering, okay, but how does this affect regular people? Totally understandable that the financial health of the US government may not be the first thing everyday Americans wake up each morning and dwell upon, but what happens in Washington doesn't stay in Washington. The bond rate, for example, doesn't just affect investors, or even how expensive it is for the US government to pay those investors. It's also considered the baseline for mortgage rates, auto loans, business loans, credit card rates. If bond rates go up, often so too do all of those.
And so that's going to be the real problem, is that you can imagine mortgage rates persist at high returns, higher yields, and therefore higher cost to customers.
It means that you're going to pay thousands of dollars more when you try to take out a car loan, or it means you're going to pay thousands of dollars more when you try to take out a small business loan to start your small business. So all of this reverberates in the real economy in ways that households can feel in super meaningful ways.
And then there's the simple fact that every dollar the US pays in interest on debt is a dollar not spent on something else. Right now, interest payments make up about 14% of the federal budget. That's more than what the US spends on national defense. And the way this is all going, it's not out of the question for interest on debt to eventually become a more expensive line item than Social Security or healthcare, too.
You are crowding out important investments that need to happen by taking up a lot of fiscal space.
And if everything gets squeezed, what happens when something goes wrong? When the world is suddenly face to face with another pandemic or war or global recession?
We're not going to have the capacity to respond with as much energy and as much vigor from a fiscal perspective because a bunch of that space has kind of been taken up.
Once you have a debt crisis, you can't issue new debt to get out of that. There's no easy solution.
Now, there are Republicans who claim Trump's
great, big, beautiful bill
actually helps solve the debt problem because, the way they see it, things like boosting energy production, deregulation, cutting entire government departments. That'll kickstart growth and expand the tax base. Then throw revenue from tariffs into the mix, and they argue that should be enough to offset all the new spending in Trump's bill and put the US on a trajectory of 3% growth for the next few years. But not everyone's buying it.
The calculations that are released by the White House suggesting that this tax cut could pay for itself, they're essentially a work of fiction. They don't have any model behind them.
I went back and looked, and forecasting 10 straight years of 3 percentage point growth, there were only 6 quarters in the history of the US when that was a good forecast. They all occurred in the 20th century. None of them happened in the 21st century. So it's not something I think anyone should count on. It's hard to move the growth rate of an economy. Moving it by 0.3% on average over 10 years, huge success. A full percentage point, unimaginable.
In fact, a range of nonpartisan analysts, including the US government's Congressional Budget Office, have argued that under almost any realistic model, the US debt is on a sharp upwards trajectory. So what's the bottom line? Well, pretty much everyone agrees right now America still has time to change course. But as one economist told us, debt crises happen slowly and then all at once. And when that happens, every solution is painful.
That's Andrew Chang adding up those daunting figures for us. Well, best-selling author Emma Donoghue has a new play about an Irish immigrant, much like herself, except he came here in the 1800s. Donoghue spoke with Eli Glasner about migrant stories on the stage and in the news. Here's a preview of Eli's story.
I wonder what you want to kind of capture with this play about the immigrant experience, because like even right now, there's close to 60,000 detainees being held in America. Nearly half don't have criminal records. Like, what do you think how this speaks to today?
Writing the play in the 2020s, I knew it was political. It's political to say that immigrants are vulnerable, immigrants are leaving a lot behind as well as coming to a new place, that they are just like us. They're giving up a lot to leave, and they wouldn't do it if they weren't desperate. And more I feel it's really important for Canada to emphasize its own multiculturalism and to say we are a rich country in every way because of the layers of immigrants that we have accepted in.
We'll bring you the full interview with Emma Donoghue in the coming days on The National. Coming up, a Canadian woodworker makes a special guitar for a Canadian rock star.
I've built 58 guitars to date, 20,000 people there, so it was a pretty amazing feeling.
How his years of hard work led to this moment? Next. So who's this? Well, you're looking at Ryan Peake, a guitarist for Nickelback, standing next to Arnold London. Now, he is a woodworker from Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia. So recently, he made Peake a custom guitar that was then played at Nickelback's show in Halifax in front of thousands of fans. And tonight, his creation coming to life on the big stage. That's our moment.
I gotta thank Arnold for that. It's a fantastic guitar.
So one of the main guitar tech for Nickelback approached me to maybe build a guitar for them, Ryan Peake. They wanted a Nova Scotia guitar. At first, I couldn't believe it, really. I've built 58 guitars to date, but most of them just went to local people in there. So 20,000 people there, so it was a pretty amazing feeling. Like 50-foot long line of guitars, and mine was sitting right in the middle of them all, and that was, that was pretty good feeling as well. And they decided to use it in Rockstar. It was really interesting to hear them live and to meet them and all that. It makes it even more personal. And the wood that I'm using right now is all over 100 years old. My guitars would have a different sound than anybody else. I can't explain to you how nice it is to be able to produce an instrument that'll make a sound that'll make somebody happy. It's a dream come true for anybody who builds guitars.
So this is amazing and a ton of work. He says it takes him roughly 200 hours to make a guitar from scratch. They all sound different because they're all made with different wood. But if you ask him, what's it like to play one of these? The answer is quite honestly, I don't know, because he doesn't actually play guitar at all. From all of us here at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to the National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.